to receive the letter of commitment.
I've been missing you, buddy.
Good morning. Good morning. We don't hear anybody say that's a great one.
That's exactly. It's always a good one.
These seats? When you're riding inside the grass.
Yeah, exactly. Sit down. Yeah, John. Sit right up front.
You know what I did? I put on it because I thought it was going to be cold this morning. I put it on lunch.
You won't regret it.
What I got a kick out of is I came back from Vietnam and I was stationed at Sault Ste. Marie, Insular Air Force Patch, northern Michigan.
Yeah, you wear them.
Well, summer happens between 2 and 4 in the afternoon, the 4th of July, and everything else is away.
Hey, Ronnie, let it go.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start our program while we're still marching everybody onto the field. My name is Robert Foos. I am a member of the Falmouth Veterans Council, and I will be your master of ceremony for today's Veterans Day ceremony. For those of you carrying cell phones, I ask that you turn them off or silence them for the duration of the ceremony. On behalf of the town of Falmouth, I welcome you and thank you for being a part of today's special ceremony and spending a portion of your holiday weekend with us. Unlike Memorial Day, which remembers and honors those who gave the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country, Veterans Day celebrates all those men and women who have served in the United States Armed Forces. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise or remain standing, remove your hats, cover your hearts, and direct your attention to the flagpole behind me as the Falmouth High School Repertory Singers perform our national anthem.
Honor guard. Preset. Arms.
Oh, say, can you sing like the dawn's early light? What so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare above bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to welcome Falmouth Scouts Molly and Joey Keefe to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Scout salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Molly and Joey. For those with seats, please be seated, and please welcome Andy Dufresne, who will acknowledge the dignitaries we have in the audience.
Honor guards. Order. Arms.
My name is Andy Dufresne, and once again, I am honored to read off the names of the dignitaries and be part of this ceremony. At least twice a year I get to wear a necktie. But anyway, to start my introductions, I'd like to recognize the Coast Guard Air Commander Brian McLaughlin. Could you stand, please, to be recognized? And somewhere in our audience, we have General Gordon Sullivan. Congressman Bill Keating. State Representatives David Vieira and Diane Fernandez. We have Town Manager Julian Suso and Julian, why don't you stand up and let everybody see who you are? Huh? He's the guy that's responsible for all this stuff. He pays the bill. We have a Board of Selectmen, Megan Eagles Bragg. Is she here? We have Vice Chairman Doug Brown. I know he's here. Stand up, Doug. Susan Moran. There you go. Doug Jones. Not here. Sam Patterson. There you go. Somewhere in our audience, usually in hiding in this corner, is Chief of Police Edward Dunn. Oh, way back there. And then he has a personal bodyguard, Fire Chief Michael Small. Oh, she's shaking his head. He's in trouble. Do we have any audience? James Cummings, the sheriff. Oh, all you guys are safe going home. Behind me, I have Director of Veterans Service and Don Lincoln and his able, very efficient Julie Canoga. Right here. On my right, I have the Falmouth Veterans Council with Jim Sawyer, Kevin Casey, Randy Collette, Robert Foose, Carol Kenny, Louis Sousa, Robert Teixeira, and Ed Van Kuren. Somewhere in this audience with his bride is our former Veterans Service Officer, Jay Hill. Jay Hill! There we go. Don't put your head down. Stand up and be recognized. There you go, with the flag. Anyway, Al Beal with his Coast Guard and the scouting groups of Falmouth.
Where's Al?
And before I turn the mic over to anybody, I would like to acknowledge the landscaping, maintenance, and planting crew under the Department of Public Works. Thanks to Jeremiah Pearson, Richie Pletcher, and the crews of the Department of Public Works and Parks Department. So, as far as I'm concerned, all the beauty that we observe in this area is due to the hard-working crews of the Department of Public Works. And now we'll get back to what the ceremony is all about, and I'll bring you back to Robert Foose, who's looking over my shoulder saying, "Get the hell out of my way."
Thank you, Andy. We're actually wearing the same suit, so our goal is that we're indistinguishable between in front of you today. We would also be remiss if we didn't acknowledge Ahmed Mustafa in the crowd, whose tireless work on behalf of the town and the veterans makes today possible. I would also like to take a moment to thank the color guards from Coast Guard Sector Southeastern New England, Falmouth Police, Falmouth Fire and Rescue, and the Falmouth Scouting Honor and Color Guards. As we march towards 11/11 on today, November 11th, known around the world as Armistice and Remembrance Day, the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour signifies the end of hostilities on the Western Front during World War I in 1918. please join me in a moment of silence for the 4.7 million Americans that fought in the Great War and the 116,708 that never came home. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite Reverend Nell Fields from Rocoit Congregational Church to deliver the invocation.
Let us be in a spirit of prayer. God of many names, we give you thanks for our nation's veterans, those of generations past and present. We thank you especially for those gathered here today. We honor them for their faithful service in defending and preserving our freedom. We are grateful for those who served during times of peace, standing ready, bravely awaiting their call to duty. We are grateful for those who served in times of conflict, bearing the physical and spiritual wounds of war. We ask that you continue to bless them and their families, heal their wounds and give them peace. May we always remember this day and every day what our country has asked of them and what they have given in return. Bless all who are gathered here this morning, O God. May we be inspired by what we see and hear so that we too may continue to respond to your call to serve. We ask in the name of all that is holy. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Fields. It is now my distinct honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, Commander Brian McSorley, the Deputy Sector Commander of Sector Southeastern New England in Woods Hole. Commander McSorley assumed the duties of Deputy Sector Commander at Sector Southeastern New England in June 2018 and oversees the execution of all Coast Guard missions by 4 cutters, 8 small boat stations, 2 aids to navigation teams, 2 marine safety detachments, and coordinates the daily operations of over 1,800 active duty, reserve, civilian, and auxiliary members across 2 sector campuses and outlying units. Prior to arriving at Sector Southeastern New England, Commander McSorley was the Maritime Safety, Security, and Environmental Protection Program Reviewer within the Coast Guard's Office of Budget and Programs at Coast Guard Headquarters. Commander McSorley's other assignments include a variety of leadership positions ashore, afloat, and in academia. He spent 6 years aboard Coast Guard and Navy ships, including a tour as the commanding officer aboard Coast Guard Cutter Sanibel here in Woods Hole. He served as an assistant professor of history at the United States Coast Guard Academy and was a founding member of the Coast Guard's Center for Maritime Policy and Strategy. He honed his marine safety and security expertise through operational and staff assignments, including at Coast Guard Sector New York. He oversaw the safety, security, and environmental compliance of all aspects of the marine transportation system and served as the operations section chief for the unified and coordinated responses to Hurricanes Irene in 2011 and Sandy in 2012. Commander McSorley's personal awards include the Meritorious Service Medal, 4 Coast Guard Commendation Medals, the Navy Marine Corps Commendation Medal, the Naval Order Award, and various service and unit awards. Originally from Old Saybrook, Commander McSorley is a graduate of the United States Coast Guard Academy, the University of Connecticut, and the Leadership and Homeland Security program at Harvard University. Commander McSorley and his wife Allison live in Mashpee with their two children, Jack and Elle. Please join me in welcoming Commander McSorley.
Thank you very much, and Rob, thank you for that introduction. You may not be aware, but Rob's family has a proud history of service to this country. Both Rob and his wife Caitlin graduated from the Coast Guard Academy and served as officers in the Coast Guard. At just 25 years old, Rob was the captain of a ship in Georgia charged with ensuring the safety and security of the Navy's ballistic missile submarine program down there. Rob's older brother Craig was also a Coast Guard officer. In fact, he was my roommate at the academy and classmate of Brian McLaughlin's and mine. And both Rob's and Caitlin's fathers both served. Caitlin's as a Coast Guard officer, and Rob's father served in the Army in Vietnam following his graduation from West Point. As we can see from the Foos and Quinn families, service and duty are often not just local, but are also familial values. It's my honor to be here today, representing not only the members of Sector Southeastern New England, but also the countless Cape Cod veterans whose service to our country also helped support and bolster the culture of community we enjoy here on the Cape. So Rob mentioned that I taught history at the Academy, so all the students out there who thought today was a day off from school, you're not quite so lucky. Little walk down the past here and look at some history. In March of 1783, George Washington gave his famous Newburgh Address, where he intended to resign his commission as the Commander-in-Chief of the All-Continental Army and return to his family farm. Now, 1783 was a time of celebration. After all, we just won the war, but it was also a turbulent time politically. Now, see if this sounds familiar to you. The nation was ripped apart by infighting, and the political divide was immense. The nation was hobbled by a dysfunctional Congress, crippling debt, and a lack of resolve by new citizens of the United States to see themselves as such, rather than to focus on what divided them as individuals. Washington made a passionate case for cultivating identity as American citizens that would elevate national unity over local tribalism. He made the argument that they could achieve general prosperity, but only through individual sacrifice and service to the community. Now, Cape Cod boasts a strong culture of communal service, born out of necessity by the unforgiving environment, and of course witnessed well before any of us were here by the Wampanoag and Nauset, and well before Bartholomew Gosnold landed at Cuttyhunk. But even the 4 centuries since European settlement, those on the Cape have looked to the sea for their livelihoods and have worked together to advance society. This culture has been drawn upon time and again when the nation needed these hardy folk. On April 12, 1861, when Confederate forces fired shots at Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, the nation sprang to action. 4 regiments from Massachusetts were among the first responders heading to war on April 18th, with ranks that included 6 Cape Codders. Meetings and rallies in various towns followed, beginning with Sandwich, which also sent the first all-Cape military unit to the front, carrying a banner with a figure of a raised arm and emblazoned with the words, "The right arm of Massachusetts." Not as well known are the many ship captains and crews from the Cape that sailed as officers aboard U.S. Navy ships through the war. You do what you know. But the geographic location of the Cape offered more than a challenging climate. It also positioned Cape residents as the nation's early warning system for threats from the sea. On July 21st, 1918, it was a hot and hazy day in Orleans. 3 miles offshore, the Perth Amboy, a 120-foot steel tugboat, chugged along the outer Cape en route Virginia with 4 barges in tow. Just before 10:30 in the morning, a deckhand on the Perth Amboy was startled by the sight of something white skipping through the water. It was not a shark. Moments later, that same something crashed into the beach, sending sand high into the air in every direction. A great thunderous roar ripped through the quiet summer morning in Orleans, but those living along the beach were confused. No one was expecting rain. Though residents did not know it at the time, the town of Orleans was making history. The projectile that landed on the beach was the only fire the American mainland received during the First World War. It was a torpedo from a German U-boat. Back on shore in Orleans, number 1 surfman William Morse was on watch at a tower at the U.S. Coast Guard Station number 40. He scanned the horizon as he always did, constantly looking for ships in peril, but with the ocean so tranquil, it seemed highly unlikely that he and his cohorts would have anything to do that day. Suddenly, the explosion ripped through his quiet morning. Pierce, a seasoned seaman who had worked his life as a lifesaver for nearly 30 years, had never seen or heard anything like this in his life before. There was little in their surf station to combat the arsenal of a German U-boat, but Surfman Moore remembered his service and his duty and dragged his surfboat out and launched, setting the stage for another mission set for the Coast Guardsmen through the remainder of the war. We could go on and on with more examples from each of the nation's wars, but the larger point is that each of us benefit from the service of those before us. And as Washington reminded us at Newburgh, service requires sacrifice. But much like the rising tide that lifts all boats, our collective service has bolstered our nation and our communities here on the Cape. While it seems like life, technology, society, you name it, is constantly changing to meet the needs of the times, or in some cases, introduce new challenges to us to deal with, the foundations of our culture, rooted in service and tradition and witnessed in local events, enable us to not only adapt, but drive the change for future good. Thank you for having me here today. I'm humbled to be among so many veterans whose past and current service propel us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander McSorley. The Greater Falmouth Community Chorus will now perform the Navy Hymn.
Honor guard, 1, 2, move.
Who is
is now my pleasure to introduce Wayne Soares. Wayne is an actor, comic, and television host. A former ESPN and Fox Sports Net broadcaster, he spends a good portion of his time entertaining veterans and active duty military around the globe at military bases and hospitals. His one-man show at assisted living facilities and soldiers' homes are a huge favorite. Wayne also writes a syndicated column titled Veteran Spotlight and hosts his own podcast, Veteran Spotlight Special Moments. Please join me in welcoming Wayne Soares.
Thank you. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Commander, one more time, Commander Brian McLaughlin, United States Coast Guard, Air Station Joint Base Cape Cod. Over the last 14 months, I've been extremely honored and privileged to sit with members of our greatest generation and hear their amazing stories of service to their country in my weekly column, Veteran Spotlight in the Falmouth Enterprise, and with my current Sweet Deal Veterans Appreciation Tour around New England. With this being the 75th anniversary year of D-Day, my remarks today take on a more powerfully significant meaning. I'm reminded of our World War II veterans. I'm reminded of Navy Quartermaster Jim Crossan on Wakayama Island in the South Pacific, a young 17-year-old hitchhiking to Tokyo with another seaman to see General Douglas MacArthur exiting from his car amongst a horde of onlookers, directly across from the Emperor's Imperial Palace. Of Lieutenant Al Benjamin's 31 missions flown with the 8th Air Force, and how he was taken to a hospital by the French resistance after he and his crew bailed out after a bombing mission. An old woman telling him the story of how her 2 sons were executed by the Nazis as freedom fighters, and of her youngest boy that was in hiding until the Americans came to liberate them. Telling me it's a moment he will never forget. Of Navy Seaman Red Blanchard recalling how kamikazes dropped out of the sky while he was a gunner on the USS Duluth, and how he hit the deck as the Japanese aircraft crashed into the side of his ship, and how he made young seamen eat saltines so they wouldn't get seasick. I'm reminded of Navy combat medic Rick Williams talking about landing on the beach at the Battle of Okinawa, the death and carnage, how he never wanted to make friends for the fear of losing them so quickly, talking about how he prayed and prayed for God to get him through the terrible ordeal, and how they had to bring in 10,000 mongoose because poisonous snake bites were at times worse than enemy bullets. Of Hubby Erdikian, who fought in Patton's Third Army, recalling he and his fellow troops coming into the town of Weimar, Germany, and gagging on the horrific smell from the Nazi concentration camp Buchenwald, telling me that if you wanted to find General George Patton, all you needed to do was go to the front lines. I'm reminded of Lieutenant Commander James Canty, telling of an air-sea rescue aboard the USS Pomfret, saving the life of a downed U.S. pilot in enemy waters, and when his patrol ran into a Japanese convoy, holding his submarine down for 30 hours, and the courage of his men, sinking an enemy freighter and disabling 2 others, telling me it's a moment he will never forget. Of Sergeant Bob Davis, United States Air Force, assigned to track enemy planes in a Quonset hut around the clock on the island of Eniwetok, and of the close camaraderie he shared with his unit. Of Tom Kirby of the Marine 3rd Air Wing, telling me returning from patrol from Midway and seeing soldiers coming back from Iwo Jima, saying the band was playing, guys in wheelchairs, stretchers, and on crutches. To hear that music and to see those guys, God bless them, he would say. Of Navy Seaman Ed Mayer, who on duty in the South Pacific, said, "We were concerned on patrol, but not too worried. We knew the Air Force, our boys in the sky, always had our backs." I'm reminded of Navy Quartermaster Dick Sherman, who was amazingly involved in 5 major invasions, recalling Okinawa, always on the lookout, always on the controls, the relentless kamikaze attacks, hitting one of their ships 21 times. Adding, "We did get him though, our ship knocked out 10 Japanese planes." Of Seaman Elliot Sklar, involved in 4 major invasions, who told of there not being any chance to enjoy the holidays during the war, especially at Okinawa where his ship was on duty 84 days in succession, and telling me that his ship lived by 3 words: sleep, eat, survive, and how much it disgusted him that African-American sailors that had fought bravely and earned medals had to sit in the back of a bus. Of Seaman Ron Woods of the British Royal Navy, who served in London's Home Guard as a 15-year-old with a piece of 3-foot pipe and a bayonet strapped to the top that he used as his weapon, and how he talked with such sadness when he went to see British POWs, softly telling me they were really in bad shape. I'm reminded of Airman George Wolfe of the Army Air Corps, who flew an amazing 47 missions in B-24s called the Liberator. The pain he experienced in losing a dear friend, and having to tell the boy's parents their son was never coming back. And a beautiful night in New Guinea, sleeping on the beach and watching the moon rise out of the water, telling me it's a moment he will never forget. Of Art Kelly, United States Marine Corps, who recalled coming into Buckner Bay and seeing just 3 ships, then awakening the next day to see over 3,000, and never forgetting the voice of the ship's chaplain on the intercom saying, "God is with us," the second bomb worked. And of saving the life of a young Filipino boy in the jungle who, had he been caught by the Japanese, would have been executed. Of Sergeant Russ Smith, United States Army, recalling the unbearable cold at the Battle of the Bulge, and of the horrific story of captured U.S. soldiers that were shot in cold blood by the German SS, and how he was always afraid, especially at night. Of Private Jim Buchanan, United States Army, remembering dragging his captain through the Ardennes forest under heavy enemy fire after his captain had been severely shot in the stomach, and saving the life of a fellow soldier whom he pulled seconds from being run over by a German panzer tank, telling me it's a moment he will never forget. I'm reminded of Charlie Barton, 3rd Marine Division, recalling the invasion of Bougainville in the South Pacific, never being able to sleep, and the emotional pain of being at war during the holidays. And finally, I'm reminded of Corporal Frank Borelli, United States Army, telling me of the intense horrors of the Nazi death camp, Auschwitz, and being led into a room and seeing where SS doctors made lampshades from the skin of dead prisoners, telling me it's a moment he will never forget. These are the stories, ladies and gentlemen, that I've been so privileged and honored to hear and to be able to write about, so that no one, absolutely no one, will ever forget what each and every one of our greatest generation, our World War II veterans, has done for our country. God bless all of our veterans, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne, for those moving remarks. I now invite all veterans in the audience to form up at the World War I Memorial, located at the back of the ceremony here, to pass in review. It's incredible, the sea of heads proceeding back to the World War I Memorial. The pass in review is a long-standing military tradition that began as a way for a newly assigned commander to inspect their troops as the soldiers, sailors, or airmen marched past. Today, these veterans aren't marching for our inspection, but rather to allow us to publicly acknowledge and thank them for their service to our nation, representing all services and every major conflict since World War II. Will the audience please rise and join me in saying thank you?
God bless this long list of people who have served their country. World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Middle East. All of these people have been overseas in the protection of the United States of America. A nice hand, everybody. Everybody. God bless America.
How fortunate are we to have so many veterans in our community? Please join me in one more round of applause. Thank you. For those with seats, you may be seated. Carol Amaral will now present flowers on behalf of the Falmouth Garden Club. The gift of flowers at a memorial site is a ritual that occurs around the world, understood in every culture. The floral tributes at funerals bespeak both beauty and brevity of life. take you to the Falmouth Garden Club. Now the Brian Boru Pipe Band. Now the Brian Boru Pipe Band will perform Minstrel Boy. Brief announcements before our closing prayer and we retire the colors. Refreshments and light fare will be served at the Falmouth Elks Lodge, located at 140 Palmer Avenue. Thank you to the Elks for hosting and to the Disabled American Veterans, DAV, for their donation to fund the light lunch. The Falmouth Military Support Group is near the World War I Memorial. Please stop by and say hello. Every Veterans Day and Memorial Day, the Falmouth Fire and Rescue Department do an outstanding job staging the enormous flag. Please join me in a round of applause. I would also like to acknowledge all our scouts. Thank you for marching and your participation today, and for everything you do around our community, and to your parents who support you. We're also looking for a Marine that lost his ring while shopping over the weekend. If you know this veteran or you are that veteran, please see us in the front. We know where it can be found. And finally, thank you everyone for your support and for being here today. Rain or shine, in the heat or in frigid temperatures, we're always impressed by the showing our community supports, the showing that our community provides to our veterans. Thank you, and give yourselves a hand of applause. And now I'd like to invite Reverend Nell Fields to deliver the closing prayer.
I'm going to give you a benediction instead. May you carry the remembrance of this day in gratitude, and may the service of others inspire you to sow seeds of kindness and mercy in all that you do and say. May God bless you and keep you, God's face shine upon you and be gracious to you, and may God give you peace. Go in love.
Thank you. Will the audience please rise as we retire the colors? Color guard, retire the colors.
Right face. Coast Guard, rear echelon, close, yeah, right down. Fast. Forward, arms. Coast Guard, forward, march.
This concludes today's ceremony. Thank you again for joining us for Falmouth's 2019 observance of Veterans Day.